mobility plan websites for future reference and ease of use. So with us today, we have two exceptional professionals to share their experiences with us. I wish more than anything we could do this in person because I enjoy being in the room and drawing energy from both Devonna and Randy in their areas of expertise. So I will introduce them to you today. Devonna Moore is a senior transportation planner with CDM Smith Engineering and Planning. She's based out of Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm pretty sure we can tell from the screen who she cheers for. But Devonna brings more than 20 years of mostly public sector planning and programming experience, and now she is working, as mentioned, in the private sector. She focuses on truck parking information management systems, and most notably, she managed and oversaw a $32 million Masto region truck parking information system through implementation. So we're very much looking forward to hearing about that. Devonna's passion is developing systems that integrate policy, design, and technology to provide available and efficient and safe truck parking for our trucking industry. Also with us is Dr. Randy Butler. Randy brings approximately 20 years of project and program management experience leading some notable freight planning projects in the public sector. Randy focuses, his passion is freight ITS and connected vehicle technology to bring safety and efficiency to the transportation network. Some of his previous positions before joining CDM Smith include being a project manager for the connected vehicle programs at the US DOT Federal Highway Administration. He was also Vice President of Computer Management Consultants and Assistant Vice President at Union Pacific Railroad. So with that, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Devonna to get us very energized and enlightened on truck parking.
Thank you, Jenny. Can everyone hear me okay? I hope so. I
We hear you,
appreciate that
Devonna.
lovely introduction. Great, great. So I'm here to talk to y'all about truck parking implementation, connected with some of my experience as Jenny highlighted. So, excuse me, I have a little scratch in my throat, so you're going to hear me coughing in between, but I'm okay. None of that, it's just a little bit of that, so we'll get through it. So first, let's start off with a polling question, just to get things going. How much longer do you guys think it takes for a semi-truck to stop than cars? You have our options here, 30%, 25%, 40%, or 15%. We'll just give you a couple of seconds just to get those votes in. All right, I think we got a majority of them in. And I see that most of you guys got it right, that about 71% is about 40%. It does take about that much longer for semi-trucks than cars. So what does that mean when we're thinking about truck parking and what the drivers have to go through? All these things, just trying to get you into that mindset and leading us up to why truck parking is important at various levels. So as you know, the impetus of a lot of this comes from Jason's Law. Jason's Law comes from the unfortunate event of Jason Rivenberg, who was murdered in his truck parking lot that was an unauthorized location and was succumbed to a couple of people who decided that they wanted to take advantage of that situation. His wife, with her great actions, has created a legislation that was really outlined in MAP 21, and it gave us the aspect of understanding why truck parking was important, not only for economic reasons or other types of reasons, but really just thinking about the truck driver and what they need. So what that led to was understanding what type of established metrics needed to be in place when it comes to freight and truck parking. What should that look like? And so through a series of surveys that was done, we were able to come up with some standardizations to say, okay, this is where and how often truck parking locations should be located, where should they be, but then going a step beyond that, the Federal Highway Administration got together to do the National Coalition of Truck Parking to understand even further what truck drivers need, what type, does not understand the metrics and where these locations would be. So and how could we get that information to them in a safe way and in a real-time way? So through those processes, they started doing things and providing truck parking funding opportunities either through BUILD or Tiger. We started seeing more emphasis on truck parking planning within the state DOTs, understanding those issues, but then taking it beyond that is like actual implementation. What types of things could be done as it relates to that? So what came out of that is, as Jenny mentioned, was a few of the initiatives that came out. Of course, the MASTO TPIMS project, which I was the project manager for in my time when I was on the public side with KDOT. This was an 8-state effort to produce a seamless truck parking system throughout the region. It was ultimately a $32 million grant that came out of Tiger. I think, and when it was one of the largest rewards that year. And we understand that to be because it was really understood that truck parking was really important and how can we do that. And while some other states had done some smaller efforts, this was a great regional effort in terms of providing that real-time truck parking information. And the real-time was the really important part because providing that level of technology, giving that to drivers within less than 5 minutes, they have updated information as they are making their decisions down the road was really important. And that's what we heard from the drivers in those surveys that came out of Jason's Law. We also heard about where they wanted those signs located, how they wanted to receive the information. So that really became about how we were going to design and frame that whole TPIM system. The system was ultimately implemented and opened up in early January 2019. And of course, right now it's been open for about a year or so, and currently it's going very well. And we've also seen some other efforts in this way, including the I-10 TPAS system, which is the effort that's happening with Arizona DOT that's setting that up between California and Texas to provide this real-time truck parking information, along with some other freight-friendly information systems with that. Again, it's speaking to the idea of not only getting our goods to where people need them, but providing these safe locations for truck drivers, always thinking about their needs, and then understanding how we can implement that in a real way. Also, the I-95 Coalition has been a long-standing group in understanding freight, how to get it moved, and then also with their efforts with the truck parking information as well. So they have been a part of this, thinking about this long before how this can grow and move forward, using technologies that we now have, and it's just been really great to see how these technologies have grown and explored, and it's becoming more and more of a common thing, and more state DOTs doing their truck parking, not only just for their planning, but getting to understanding planning down to the implementation, which is really important. And even with the Florida DOT, they have worked really extensively with the private sector in some of their locations near their ports or some of their district areas in deploying these also truck parking systems, really related not only to long haul, but also to the staging of truck parking and getting that information out there and working with those local industries within there to provide that staging truck parking that is very well needed in the urban fringe as well. There we go. So again, how does this help? Having that real-time, as I mentioned before, having that real-time information is very important. Before, a lot of truck drivers had apps that they would use, but it would be mostly for crowdsourcing. And while that information may have been accurate at the time, 30 minutes later, it may not be the same. They may say some spaces are available, but within 30 minutes, it could fill up really easily. So with this real-time information, the way the data is set up, we can provide this information through the signs as they ask, also through their in-cab. They also ask for mobile accessible through their data through their mobile device or their in-cab as they're going through there. So it's very important that they were able to get this in various multiple fashions that lend to giving them the best decision after making their choice along their routes. So locating the signs at the really key locations along the routes was very important. What we heard from the truck drivers is that they wanted to see the signs if we were having them on the road. They wanted to see them at least an hour out from the rest for the next stop. And then by the time they got to the next stop, maybe 5 minutes before, 5 miles before, they were already looking at another sign that showed them the next 2 or 3 locations for those sites. So having that rolling tandem system is very important in providing that information so that they can adjust when they need to exit off, understand their hours of service and what they have to do with that so they're not wasting a lot of time looking for truck parking or ended up parking in places that are not safe, such as on the side of a road or in a place that is not well lit. So the issue is, how do we get to the implementation? It's really important to really start at when you're in the planning piece of this, to think about this at the policy level. What are your design impacts for truck parking? What are your ultimate goals? Is it safety? Is it economic development? Understanding what that means. And also thinking about it in a way that is that you're providing implementable strategies. There are actual strategies that can be done that your agency can handle, and you've identified who needs to be at the table, and that it's often done through the stakeholder engagement. And stakeholder engagement, and it's really important, especially when you're determining how and what where you want to deploy, what technology you want to use, and how you want your infrastructure to be. That this is all impacted by that. And through that process, this will help you define the roles and responsibilities of those at the table, because oftentimes when you're thinking about implementation and through the planning process, you need to identify who's going to be at the table, who's important, whose money needs to be there, who doesn't, and understanding that. And when you define those roles and responsibilities, it gives everybody an onus in the process, and it's a more collaborative process, and everybody's clearly understood how the process will work, what the expectations are. So it is very important in terms of the DOT operational workflow, the guys out there in the field, even on the private sector as well. As everybody understands their roles and their responsibilities and understands why truck parking is important, through those desired impacts that were established in the policy, it becomes very clear what truck parking is for that particular agency and what it means and how it will be deployed. So, for example, one of the key things we can talk about when we're thinking about the policy, just as an example, is like, where do we want to deploy? I know with the we're dealing with the master TPIMs, some of the DOTs were keen on just wanted to do the public sites because that's what they were used to, and some wanted to go beyond and work with the private sites as well. And so here I have listed here some of the pros and cons related to that. Of course, with the public sites that the agency, especially DOTs, own, it's the way it's laid out. They have direct access from the highway. A very accessible design, and the DOTs have a greater control over the data and collection and how that is distributed out. However, at those times, there could be limited parking slots and not as many amenities as you would see at a private location. But at the private sites, we know that they are the majority of the truck parking system, so it's very important to have them at the table. In any case, whether you decide to deploy with them or not, you definitely want to have them at the table to understand what they're doing and what their issues are. Some of the cons is that if there's often indirect access from the highway, they may have to take a couple of right turns or left. There is a cost to the drivers based on the level of amenities, but those amenity options are something that the drivers are willing to pay for with that. So these are kind of the things. This is just an example of what you would be thinking about in terms of how you wanted to deploy it, your truck parking, and where it would need to be, and some of the things that would be defined at your policy level within your planning document. Next, of course, is technology. And as I stated earlier, it's really exciting to see, even from the time that MASTOS, the TPIMS project started just a couple of years ago, to now the various types of technology that is out there. The key thing in thinking about this at that planning level and you're getting down to your implementation is how you want your data to be collected, where it will be collected, understanding your limitations of your servers, what would need to be added to that, how it can be incorporated into your current ITS infrastructure. And so all those types of things you want to think about. And then, as I stated earlier about the data dissemination, making those decisions about how you want the information to show up. Is it going to be in a platform that other vendors can use? If you were to release that to the third party, do you just want to keep it on your 511 system? How would that look and how would that work? And then, of course, understanding the technologies that are out there and how you would implement that, making those types of choices of technologies that are out there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So when you think about your technology selection, and it basically runs what we call two different types, called the in and out counting and the space by space counting. And the entrance and exit counting is normally involved in pavement magnetometer, video cameras, and laser technology. These work really well when you have a restricted access of one location in and one location out, and it's easier to count the trucks if they're going a certain location. And it's not too much of a mix with vehicles if the vehicles are going another way. But if you have a mixture of both, you're going to want some type of technology that is able to read what a truck is versus a car and be able to count that information accurately and calibrate that correctly. And with the space by space, you have the infrared magnetometers that are in ground that also use video cameras to also verify what they are seeing. These work well as well, but you have to think about certain situations such as your typical weather within your area. So if you're in a place that has a lot of, that can get snow in your area and these lines could be covered up and the truck can't see and might not know exactly where to park, the counts could be off with that. So you have to think about all these types of things where you're thinking about where the technology is, think about your maintenance and operations. Typically, a system that is more advanced and has the video analytics may cost a lot more on the front end, but it's going to save you money in the long end in terms of maintenance and operations and how often you need to go out there to readjust the magnetometers or videos that are out there. So these are all key considerations when you're thinking about your actual technology selection. And again, that goes back to the policy level in terms of your design impacts and what you want your strategies out there to look like. And so these types of things are just very important when you're thinking about that, these little nuances and how that will work. So last, one of the key things, of course, is when we think about implementation is the actual infrastructure. How do we make those decisions about where these sites are going to be located? What information do we need, and how do we coordinate with others, and how do we think about the development of the actual projects and implementing it out? And so these are just a few things that I've listed out in terms of what you will be looking for in terms of actually establishing and understanding and designing your infrastructure. One thing that I call is a facility assessment, and that helps you to understand your utilization of your current facilities, your rest area or truck stop facilities, outlining and knowing exactly what amenities are available. The utilization and amenity level of things are very important because you want to make sure that if you are going to be deploying certain technologies or need to maybe expand your sites, you need to know currently how much or how often these sites are being used, where they're being used, and how often during the time of day where they're filling up or letting out. And if you see some facilities that are maybe underutilized, how that can be improved possibly through the providing more amenities, so assessing in that way. So those things are really important. Also looking at your freight heavy corridors, you want to look at the freight data that you have along a long corridor and possibly segment that out based on either the freight volumes that are happening, whether or not it's in an urban or rural area. Because I stated before, the truck parking can vary in terms of the needs related to is whether or not it's long haul or staging. So long haul you see more in the rural areas or outside the urban fringe, and the staging more in the actual urban areas. And that leads you to thinking about the land use coordination. We know that truck parking sometimes is seen as an undesirable land use, but it is something that we all know is needed. And so, when you're thinking about where trucks can park in certain locations and the needs for that, how do you get away from the NIMBYisms that are out there, getting that education out there about how freight is important, and also thinking about how the DOT can partner with local agencies and provide incentives to work with the city to provide truck parking in locations that are maybe currently underutilized by the city, for instance, like a park and ride lot that is full during the day with the cars, but in the evening time it's completely empty, and that could provide opportunities for trucks to park there. So it's those type of examples that we can look at with there. And then also with the actual local land use coordination in terms of when they are the permitted system and then they are allowing industry heavy clusters in their areas, and the requirements to possibly for them to have truck parking requirements for those industry clusters as well. So there's opportunities there in partnerships and incentives that can happen between these two groups to match up their the resources that they have. Next, of course, my project development, how that would work in terms of integrating that into the operations and workflow of your agency, who would be responsible for what, and that goes back to defining those roles and responsibilities we talked about in the policy section with that. And that, of course, leads us to the implementation and the actual funding and programming, finding that funding, going through the planning and programming process. And most DOTs have a process of going through their planning stages through their long-range plan and actually making it through their programming documents such as their STIP process and their actual funding and identifying fundings in those locations. So that is very important to make sure that that is all being outlined and identified as we're going through the project development implementation process. And I just wanted to throw this in there. Other key item is defining your options, exactly how you want this to do. And I just brought this up as an example because it was really an interesting thing for us with the TPIMS project. This something like that had never really been done. So we had to work closely with at the federal level with the MUTCD folks there. And if you don't know or have not worked with them before, they're very protective about their guidebook and their guide and their standards, and they have to be. It's a reason for that. But this was something new. We had to make sure that we were providing enough menu options for our partners that they have the right types of signs because everyone doesn't have rest areas. Some of them were using way stations. Some of them were using just, they wanted to name it different things or have an exit number. And as I stated before, you want to have that sequential information on the sign for the truck drivers to know where they're going. So it may be that it may just say the next exit, but the next exit or the next area may actually be a way station. So we went through a series of meetings with MUTCD, even down to that truck parking sign with the truck with the P on there. We wanted a different type of look for that and give it ownership to the TPIMS project, and wanted to make things a little bit different to provide information, especially if we were dealing with the private sites as well and how we could get their names on the board. So it was a lot of what I call your mama letters back and forth we had with them as a group. And but ultimately we came down to this decision. And so these are some of the key things that you may not at this point now have to deal with because they were kind of hashed out, but understanding what your needs are in your design and how you're going to move forward with that, all these key things are going to be really important. So of course we get down to the actual implementation. You got your project out there, you're ready to go, you're thinking about, you thought about your software integration, how that's going to work with your, like I said, your ITS infrastructure, your servers, as I said before, the actual construction of it based on whether or not it's going to be redesigned or designed around your current locations or if you're going to change that, actually doing your system testing, getting that testing out and seeing what it looks like, understanding that vendor developer outreach, and that goes back again to the idea of how you want this data disseminated, and if you wanted to have it in a way that vendors can also use it on their platform, providing a public data feed in a format that's universal to these vendors that are out there. And that's one of the key things that I did with the TPIM system is actually reaching out to those vendors, understanding that trying to get the idea of what type of format will work for their platforms, and commonly it was the JSON format for that, to get that integrated into their platform. Because for us, it was about not just trying to keep that data to ourselves, but getting it out there to as many as people as possible, getting it out there to the drivers in every pathway as possible. So we reached out to at least over 100 vendors that got involved in this process to get that done. And then also something that's sometimes overlooked is the performance measurement, the data collection and analysis. You want to see how the process is going. You want to establish what your performance measures are, whether it be to increase the utilization or utilization of underutilized facilities, or increase your safety, decrease crashes, whatever that may be. You want to set that forth pretty early and understand how you're going to get that information, how you're going to measure that. These are all key things when you're thinking about truck parking in terms of going from your planning level down to your implementation point with that. So let's go to a polling question. What is the maximum amount of hours a truck driver can expend before they're required to stop for the day? Yes, so we got the answers here, and the answer is, excuse me, the answer is 10 hours, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, my throat got caught up. So I think there's also a little bit out there about the 14-hour, but we also know that with COVID going on right now, those hours of service have changed. And that has been an interesting process and understanding how freight needs to flow, but making sure the drivers are safe, but we're getting materials out there in the middle of this pandemic. And so again, just thinking about that little bit of time that they have, they really don't want to spend the hour or so that they often use for truck parking. So we want to make this as easy as possible for our truck drivers and giving them that information, but it also helps our system overall as well in keeping everyone safe. So the real key takeaways from this is obviously for me is agency coordination through within each of these DOTs, the local governments and NPOs, but also within each of these agencies to understand their roles and responsibilities, how they want the system to look, to come together at the table to really partner and understand how we can work together and open up this process when it comes to truck parking and how everyone is involved in it and everyone has a stake and onus in this process. And that was all. Thank you.
Thanks, Devonna. At this time, we'd invite y'all to unmute and ask your questions or make your comments verbally or in the chat box. I see some typing happening in the chat box, Devonna.
Okay.
While folks are typing, Devonna, what was the plan? What did the planning effort look like before the $32 million Tiger grant was approved? Was that a multi-state partnership to get to that point? How did that process play out?
You know, I think at that point, MASTO had come together and it was talked about at the executive level about how can that region be freight friendly. Now, most of it had already done, like I said, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota had done some smaller effort pilot projects with truck parking user technology. But the idea was that, okay, how can we make this more regional and not just state by state? And so taking the information that they already had in terms of they already had a truck parking project or plan in place that identified their key freight locations and what they needed to do. It was really just taking that information all together, combining that into the application process, just getting together and doing it. And KDOT ended up being the lead agency taking that on because they had the availability and bandwidth to submit the application and get that done. And that's how KDOT became the lead agency and I became the project manager for that. So it was really just about, it really came from the top level. And that was really great because I don't know if it would have happened without having that vision at the executive level to think about having a freight-friendly type of thought process for that particular region.
Right. Thank you.
I think the answer was 10 hours.
Yes,
Thank you.
10 hours.
My answer. Got it. Sorry, I saw that.
So in the interest of time, I want to make sure we have enough time for Randy to go through his presentation as well. Let's hold questions now until the end, and we'll switch over to Randy.
Okay, Victoria, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, good. All right, I'll go to the next slide. We'll get started here. So what I'm going to be talking about is smart technologies and the automation side, both from the technical side and also more so from the logistics and business side, and how automation can concur on both sides to really help the overall operation of trucks in the freight industry. The agenda I'm going to cover first is the Automated Driving Systems project that CDM Smith was awarded this past April, supporting Ohio DOT, Drive Ohio, in testing automated driving systems. This is a $15 million project. $7.5 million came directly from the federal share, and Ohio DOT did the other $7.5 million in the process. I'm going to touch a little bit on truck platooning to really give you an understanding and more so of the technology underneath too that helps with the automation side of it. And then we're going to kind of reverse here as we go into Freight Advanced Traveler Information System. There's a lot of activity that could be occurring both from the logistics side and from the information, how we bring all this information together. As pointed out by Devana in her presentation, there's a tremendous amount of data on truck parking. So how do we find the ways to start pushing that information instead of the drivers having to pull it? And then finish up with a little bit of smart mobility that's going to be focused in the same area. More so, I think some of you may have seen this particular piece of the presentation, but more so in respect to how entities can start pushing information about availability of pickups and deliveries and appointment times and things of that nature directly to the drivers and to the driver logistics companies in order to help facilitate better flow of information and better operating conditions. So we'll start out talking a little bit about why some of the goals of freight technology, and I think I covered a little bit of this in travel times and traffic flow, along with freight intensive streets and highways, the logistics efficiencies of maximizing the loaded moves and with the logistics companies, and then enable the truck platoons also, which is part of the overall automation of freight vehicles. With this automated driving systems grant that we were just awarded this past April, we're in the process of planning the activities. But some of the activities focus specifically on the safety aspects of the ADS program. We want to be able to provide through this whole grant and the applications or the research that we'll be doing is how automated vehicles could operate safely over the nation's highways. We'll be looking specifically for this in the rural areas of the country. And there's 32 counties in eastern Ohio that are participating in this, and we'll be running both automated trucks and truck platooning along with passenger cars. If you're familiar with the levels of automation from the Society of Automotive Engineers, basically we'll be going to level 3, which is a kind of conditional arrangement as far as there still will be a driver in the car, but it will be basically there for any kind of interruptions that need to take place that are not occurring, or to be able to help with the data collection process. There'll be a tremendous amount of data collected in this project that will be used by the DOT for the rulemaking aspect of it. And as we go forward and understand how better we can improve the automated driving systems, this data is going to be crucial. It's a 4-year project, and like I said, we should be kicking off the beginning of the project sometime this September. We'll be collaborating with other environments. There was 8 awards in this particular grant. It was a $60 million grant, and I think there were 73 applications. So there we will be collaborating with the other 8 awardees and also publishing the information that we learned through this whole process. Specifically in truck automation, we'll be looking at how we progress through the automated process, and again, using the public roads. And on the rural routes, we'll be not only doing platooning, we'll also be doing running trucks in full automation and being able to understand how they operate and what kind of improvements are needed in the infrastructure to be able to support operating autonomous vehicles. Now, on the truck platooning side, as we have, and I'm sure you know, there's a lot of great benefits associated with the drag that's created with the 2 trucks or 3 trucks operating together. like I said, I'm sure that you've seen these before, but I do want to emphasize the importance of why truck platooning is. It basically started out at level 1. And level 1 is really where it's driver assisted. You have 2 drivers in the trucks, and they are, the first driver is controlling the first part of the truck, first part of the platoon, excuse me. And the second driver is just there for emergencies because the first driver is operating the technology to be able to do this. To kind of create a road train, you might say, in this process. And it was mentioned recently by USDOT Secretary that automation and truck platooning and truck automation are really crucial. They learned these lessons through the pandemic so far and the issues associated with keeping the supply chain moving. So they have specifically put an emphasis on it. And Gideon Smith participated in one of the first phases of truck platooning and creating a complete plan for early deployment. We did this past year that ran from everything from the operation to the performance measures, user requirements. We did it all. We did it in about 10 months and pulled all this information together. So it's going to be considered a foundation document. And if any of you would like to have a copy of it, I'd be glad to share it with you. But it really outlines specifically, more so from the technical side, all of the capabilities associated with doing truck platooning. I threw this slide in at the last minute. You may not have it, but this is specifically what we knew. The 16 states that have approved truck platooning. We see South Carolina and Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina here that have basically approved it for demonstration and testing. One of the key focuses here is getting everybody involved. I was a project manager on the Smart Columbus truck platooning project, and one of the key areas as we were doing our user requirements and going back and talking to people about specifically how do we get the truck platooning implemented on the highways. And there was more concerned about how people envision truck platooning. You look at 2 trucks going down the road, and in some cases in the testing, they've actually gotten 4 meters apart. And I'd hate to be in that second truck when that 4 meters in front of me is the back end of another truck. But anyway, that is some concern from the public of how trucks, are running. So we had to figure out a way we identify the trucks that were platooning. We had to educate law enforcement, get training there for them, and be able to continually do this public awareness of what truck platooning is. Now, I'm going to jump again. I've talked kind of generally about the technology associated with it, but I'm going to talk about what we can do to really facilitate some of the things that we see today. And I just kind of like to give you a quick scenario. I like to use this in presentations where I used to live in Northern Virginia and very close to I-81. And there was a fantastic Amazon facility that was located very close to my home. And I would see these trucks come into the facility and leave there. And I kept thinking to myself as watching this whole operation is you have a truck that's leaving probably one of the most sophisticated distribution centers in the world that is basically sorting and loading and getting all of these wonderful packages out to us every day. But they're turning onto a highway system that has very antiquated information for the driver. So what we've tried to do here, I wrote a concept of operations about 6 years ago about how freight advanced information can be turned to start being, instead of having the driver have maybe 3 devices in his truck at the same time, trying to get the truck parking up, trying to get local weather up, trying to get the congestion up, having them all run at the same time, trying to pull all of this together, along with creating some predictive services. So what we've come up with is basically the Freight Advanced Traveler Information System, which I was the program manager for 3 prototypes while I was at USDOT. But trying to bring in this information so it can be more of a corridor freight information system, that information can not only be created on demand, but it also can be pushed to the driver. So once the driver pulls out onto the I-81 at this point and is making its way to destination, information is continually being pushed to them. And there's three components associated with that. And Devana's really talked specifically about the truck parking information, being able to take that data and push it forward directly out to the driver. Let me go to the next slide. And we're talking about kind of giving a complete network of it, not only commercial and public facilities together, and that real-time information. And I wrote that down as Devana was talking about. That's the information that's going to be available and how we can push that out. And maybe even implementing truck parking reservations in some cases. I know this is an issue for public sites, but private sites are doing it, and it can become over part of this system. Alternate routing services. So as the driver is going down and there's conditions ahead, maybe there is a condition associated with an accident or something, and there's an alternate route. Well, it would automatically give the driver that information. Now, I know that's available in a lot of the apps today, but it will be specific truck information about routes that are approved for a truck to operate on. You know, with Google, you might get a route through some neighborhood or something of that nature. But we use we're using in the LA project I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, we are using in the terminal mount system, which is focused specifically on the driver, the truck driver, and the size and weight of the vehicle. The next is something that is really, it's gained the interest of a lot of state DOTs here recently. Several of them have asked us to give presentations on this about how we use predictive services. You know, be able to take the current driver's location, look at historical traffic patterns, look at estimated hours of remaining on their driving, the 10 hours we were just talking about. Look at highways, construction, weather. Be able to push that into a recommendation for the driver, understanding what's ahead of him, what's the situation, and then relying on the weather services also. What's the issue ahead of for me to be able to deal with? So I can start making plans as a driver where I need to stop and what I need to do and park. And this is a quick example of what I'm talking about, basically creating this cloud. And you know, I noticed I put Nebraska right here at the top, but we overall have this capability to be able to bring this traffic data together with analytics, look at the road weather information that the states are publishing, the 511, truck parking availability, from what Devana talked about. Bring this all together and put it into one application that can be activated by the driver by just entering the destination, his profile, his or her profile, and specifically push this out to the driver in operation. This is an example. Actually, this example was created for the I-26 corridor when we were doing a proposal on it, and it is specifically focused on providing information as you're coming into the Charleston gates and at the intermodal facilities there at the port service centers, where they could look specifically at what information is available about predicted terminal time, current time, engage status, things of that nature. And if there was a truck parking location outside that they could basically park and regenerate their hours of service again, maybe they're running short and don't want to go into the facility, considering that they may be running out of time, they could park and get information. And this same application applies to more so to urban truck parking where there's congestion and they may want to park out here, and then have the information about a specific distribution center about the availability. And that's where it comes to that partnership, working with the private companies to pull this together to make it a joint effort. And benefits, I think I've covered productivity and efficiency, faster decisions by the driver, having information together, creating a complete work itinerary, and navigate to their destinations, to be able to understand exactly what's ahead of me and that information pushed to them. Public benefits, quality, traffic operations, economic development. I'm not going to go into those because I'm running close out of time. I did want to cover this last slide. And I think, again, you may have seen these, so I'm going to skip over and really talk about one slide in here that is the focus. And this was really, this whole program, I am the lead on this. This is through another consultant, but I'm the lead on this in LA. And what we really try to do here is focus on how we could use routing to the port facilities based upon congestion, based upon travel time, based upon information coming from the port on the gate queues. We have that in place. So this is kind of a little bit of a spaghetti factory, but once the driver leaves just say in the Riverside area, just coming into the port, to have the information about how the congestion is flowing, what time will I have to wait at the port in order to drop my load off or pick a load up. So we're trying to give them information more and more so throughout the process into destination. One thing that going back to that first question about the 40 feet on stopping, we've actually included an application in here that will give a warning based upon congestion of any slowdowns back to the drivers. So there's been so many rear-end collisions of drivers that have come up on congestion and not been prepared to stop. So we'll have that working this September and up and running and start testing. And I am going to skip this one and just open the floor up for questions. I think we have 4 minutes left. Hello?
Hey, thanks, Randy. Yeah, so anyone with questions, please unmute and ask them aloud or type them in the chat box.
Hello, this is Sarah Cox with Obesity Cog.
Okay.
Hey, Sarah, we can hear you.
Good deal. Good job, Randy, on it. Great presentation on those technologies. And I think I see SCDOT, Diane Mackey on the line. Diana, I think I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. In terms of these technologies being applied to, for example, our interstates, et cetera, major corridors, is there any feel you could share from that in terms of DOT exploring any of these technologies or opportunities for future partnerships on those opportunities, especially in regards to, I guess, using the ITS infrastructure that DOT already has?
Yes, in fact, the Los Angeles Metro, which is covers all of the internal transportation needs for the LA Basin, was able to get an ATC-MTD grant for, I think it was $4 million to take this Freight Advanced Traveler Information System. And like I began that project back when I was at USDOT in 2007, and I retired there in 2014. So I had that project all the way through. So we created prototypes and we did a lot of things in respect to getting it up and running. But LA Metro received a grant to come back to that particular application. In fact, they've even renamed it. But the application was basically a modernization of what we've already done. There is a strong interest from the USDOT that if you take things that they've already spent money in developing, is to be able to take them a few more steps forward. And this is what the case happened with LA Metro. And we're also seeing it on another grant that we just we were a partner on. It's another ATC and TD grant for I-70, which states of Indiana and Ohio work together, and we'll be testing automation, truck automation and truck platooning on that corridor, and being able to use some of the logistics scenarios that I talked about earlier. So yes, there's a great opportunity with the USDOT to take these type of applications and take them a few more steps forward. Hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Ronnie. Yes, sir.
So Randy, we have a couple more questions in the chat box. I know we're running low on time, but I think we can get one or two in. So Jim Cook asked, I may have missed it, but is it legal for trucks to park on ramps or on-ramps or off-ramps to the interstate? So Devana, you might.
Yeah, Devana.
Yeah, defer to Devana. Yep.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. It is not necessarily illegal. Sometimes it is depending on the state, but it's definitely frowned upon. That is one of the reasons, because it could be a safety issue, especially at night if you can't see their lights and the cars crash into them. That has been a major issue. And also in terms of the ramp, on the wear and tear on that, the maintenance and operations really has a toll and cost on that as well.
Thanks, Devana.
Hey, folks, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
Rick Todd with Trucking Association. I just dialed in. I had an earlier meeting. Apologize for being late. Are we still in the lunch and learn phase?
We are. We're currently wrapping up the lunch and learn,
Yeah.
getting
Can I
in the
comment
last.
on the previous question?
Yes.
Just to kind of supplement on the parking on the ramps. Years ago, when the DOT, working with Highway Patrol and the counties, closed a bunch of rest areas around the state, we kind of pitched a hissy fit and went to the legislature and got some funding for what you know now as truck-only parking facilities. And at the same time, they agreed, law enforcement as a community agreed to try to work with truckers and allow them to park as long as they're safely parked and follow Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulation guidelines with retroreflective triangles and those kinds of things safely off the road, allow them to park without harassing or ticketing them, and that's worked fairly well. It's discouraged on the entrance and exit ramps, but we're not aware of any real strict enforcement, but it's not like we encourage it.
Right.
Good afternoon.
Hey, Diane, we can hear you.
Hey, okay, all right. Listen, I know that Sarah had a question earlier. Randy discussed the federal USDOT opportunities for funding, which is something that we would be interested in. We're in the planning phases for truck parking analysis. And Sarah, I'd be happy to talk to you offline in the interest of time. But yes, that's something that's on our radar. But again, it takes planning, commitment, and funding. In fact, that's part of our thought process. So thanks for the question.
Okay, I have one question that's showing up in the chat box real quickly on the breakthroughs you're talking about. 2 cars passing in the left lane and they need to exit. Basically, the systems are set up. It's a full 360 radar system on each truck that is sensing all the time on the sides and front. So if a car comes in and needs to make an exit and moves in between the platoon automatically breaks apart using the radar. And then once the car is exited and not completely out of the way, it automatically reestablishes the platoon. So in any case, if it's a breakthrough for any reason, the trucks immediately release the platoon and start operating on their own. So in the case of the level 2 and level 1 and level 2, and this is something that is required to have that second driver in the truck.
Thanks, Randy.
Uh-huh.
So wrapping this up, again, thank you so much for everybody's time today. And thank you, Devonna and Randy, for sharing your experience with us and putting this wonderful information in front of us. On this last slide is the information to connect with both of our freight plans going on. The Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester Freight Mobility Plan information is on the right. The Appalachian Council of Governments Freight Plan information is on the left. So please refer to that, and the recording of today's Lunch and Learn will be made available there. And Randy, something you said about watching a vehicle pull out of a highly complex advanced manufacturing center onto our public infrastructure and seeing the difference in available technologies, I think that resonates with all of us. And hopefully that will be one of the positive outcomes, is leveling that playing field a little bit, shrinking the gap between the technology available on those sites onto our infrastructure network. So with that, we'll go ahead and close this meeting out, and we'll look forward to the next Lunch and Learn.